in this project I'm going to use the new tools in Quickdraw version 3.5 to create a multi-layered complex structure. Now the first time I'm actually going to do is open from the program files directory, wherever that is. It's typically on x86. I'm going to load the multi-layer structure library just to talk a little bit about where it came from. I'm going to scroll up. The first thing that's going to have for me is the basic tabby structure, which was one warp over weft over warp. If I copy that structure, I can then determine the layers, and the key to that functionality is the structures here and the layers here. So if I wanted to do the double weave, I could just copy that. If I copy that to A, copy that to B, or if I wanted to add a third structure for the 3-layer triple weave, or however many I wanted to add, I can create those. The layer structuring then would allow me to put those 3 structures into any layer I want. Now this is a pretty general tool. It will actually allow you to take any structure and create as many as you want to and layer them. And similar thing, that's how the triple weave, the 4-layer structures, were all created, and I'll walk through the next step in that here in a moment. Now in order to do that, the one requirement is that I need to have all the structures have to be the same size. So for example, for this double weave twill layers here, I've got a tabby structure, a point twill, and 2 different diagonal straight twills. And since the tabby structure is a 2x2, the point twill is a 6x6, and the other twills are a 4x4, a 12 thread by 12 thread was the common multiplier. So that I can now set that up and blend those any way I want to. So these are basically a handful of mixes. So for this project, what I'm going to do is actually utilize the tables that are created down here at the bottom. Let me walk through how those were created. So what I want to do is a 4-layer structure. So I'm going to lay it out in quadrants. So the first quadrant I want to deal with, I'm going to copy the A here. Let me zoom that up a little bit bigger. So I'll copy that to structure A. The opposite twill. Copy that to structure B. And A and C are the same, but I've already got them here, so I'm just going to copy it to C. Copy it to D for clarity. Now these could be any structure I wanted to. They could be any size. And I can put them in any order. So now the next thing I'm going to do is go back over to the untitled window. When I go to a new window, I go back to the grid. Those structures are still sitting in the copy buffers. I can see those from the message up there. As I mouse over them, it tells me the size that they're defined. So the first structure I want is in fact A, B, C, D. When I hit the stack button, it's going to clear the grid and create that new stack diagram. And so when I hit the copy, and when I go back to the structured library, the ABCD sequence here, so I'm ready to paste that. Just for references, I'm just going to show what it looks like. And there I've got the same figure that I just created. So that was simply how that is created. When I go back to the untitled again, and clear the grid, I don't necessarily need to clear it. In this case, I want BCDA. When I hit the stack, I've now got a new figure that gives those orders in that stack, and I can change that any sequence I want. Again, when I hit the copy, and I go back to the structure library, that should be the second figure, and I can see the second figure is created. And same manner, when I go back to the structure library, if I want to do them in CDAB, again, Copy that, it'll give me the third figure. And DCAB, so I can, again, create those any order I want. When I hit the stack, clears the screen, creates a new figure, copy it. When I look back at the structure library, there was the fourth figure that I'd created. So that's where those 4 figures came from. Okay, so now I've got the structures I want to merge for my project. So I can use that same technique to create any structure, tabby, twill, hux, spot Bronson, so long as the various structures are the same size, I can layer them any way I want to. Now what I'm actually going to do is grab this structure and replace that into the A. So I've now got a different structure in A. And unlike the original, which were 4x4s, these are now 16x16, so it's a much larger structure. And I keep doing that until I've got the 4 copied. I need to make sure I catch the 16x16 on all 4 of them. Copy to D. Again, when I do the mouse overs, I can see those are all the same. Now I'm going to go back to my new template and to clear the grid. Now what I actually want to do is create the project I want to do. And what I'm going to do is 4 quadrants. The lower quadrant will be structure A. Second quadrant in B, so I'm now, when I hit the select C, it's actually going to give me a symbol. It's going to show me a different color, and that's not going to be color that is just showing which structure. So I now have a structure here that's going to give me 4 structures, A, B, C, D, B, C, D, A. So it's got those 4 twills in there. So now I should be ready, since I have the structures defined, I've got the profile defined. When I do the thread substitution and I zoom back out, it's now created that structure. And it's kind of hard to see and understand that, so we're going to go to the next phase, and I'm going to export that as a draft. I can vaguely see the quadrants there, but what I need to do is to set some color into that so I can actually see something. So when I go back to the warp, get rid of the extraneous, what I'm going to do is do a 1 quadrant in a dark red and with a lighter red weft, and then I'm going to do something similar in the second quadrant with a lighter weft, third quadrant with a lighter weft, and a 4th quadrant with a lighter weft. So I've now got a color scheme to play with. So when I'm done with that, so in the first quadrant, I can see the 2 halves of the pattern here. So I want to create the warp color rotation. So I'm going to start with a blue thread, green, and the mustard yellow and the red. And that's set up the warp color sequence. The first structure is on the right, so that's why they're done in that order. Now when I want to set up the weft, it's kind of the reverse order, so I want to start with the pink, lighter yellow, lighter green, lighter blue, and now I should be able to actually see the red quadrant, the yellow, the green, and the blue. You'll notice that you can physically see them, but it's with the 4 layers shown in there, it's kind of hard to see what's going on. So that is the reason for the updated versions. If I look at the finished version, at first it just looks garbled because it's actually looked through the pattern recognition, and if I hit the pull down here, when it does the laces, it's finding a lot of thread patterns that look like deflected weaves, which is not really in this. So if I hit the multi-layer, it's going to figure out what the surface layers are, what the background layers are. So it's actually now showing pretty clearly, here's the warp, I can see a twill in it. I can see the red warp and weft, I can see the yellow warp and weft, the green in the third quadrant, and the blue in the fourth quadrant. So I can see that I actually did create the pattern I'm looking for, at least from a surface level appearance. Now the other question is whether that's actually a multi-layer. So the other tool that is potentially useful for this, if I look at the multi-layer cloth, that structure is actually a little larger than I can view with the multi-layer cloth. So what I'm going to actually do is go through and cut it in half. So I've cut that. So I've now got a smaller version of this pattern. And when I scroll up, I can see I've still got a respectable amount of it. Now when I go to the display multi-layer cloth, it's a tool that was originally written for folded weave. And for multi-layer, it has some different rules. So I need to tell it I've got a 4-layer cloth. So I can now see the twill on the 4th layer here. This layer looks kind of funny. And if I actually select that block of threads, and in that area, block 4 is in the front. So this would give me, for the bottom half of the pattern, this would be layer 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can see the red threads, the red warp threads, the yellow warp, the mustard warp threads, the green, blue, and this one is blue, then red, yellow, green. So I can actually see the 3 different layers. I can see, so I can see the first shot, and it's the front layer and the back layer. When I hit the next shot, I can see the threads come down. It's forming the 2nd layer here, and back up to the back. And you'll notice the color change is so that I can see the difference in shots rather than each individual warp color. In this case, it would actually have been done in a different warp color. So as I hit different shots, so by the time of the first, when I'm down to shot 5, I can actually see the 2nd shot on this warp, and I can see the over 2, under 2 on the first one, the same over 2, under 2, offset by 1. So I can now see the point twill forming. And as I keep looking at shots, when I hit shot 9, 10, I've now got a couple of shots on each one. When I keep going, I can see that the whole structure is forming in. So I've got the full 4 cycles of the point twill, 4 cycles the 2nd layer. And I've now actually can see those 4 separate layers forming. And in this region, I can see, kind of how the threads are migrating from one layer to the next. So in the middle of that, there could be some thickness and irregularity. But I can actually see that I do have the warp pattern that I'm looking for. And there is a little bit of irregularity that happens on the edges just as it's trying to figure out how to draw the thread paths. And it's saying it may skip a couple of threads on the edge there. So if I go back and look at it, yes, that's the pattern I've got, and there really is 4 layers in that pattern. Thank you, and I will go ahead and save that so you can get your own copy of it. Thank you. Bye now.